In the days when there was no king in Israel, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. But God was preparing an eternal kingdom. From David's throne to the cross of Christ, the story of kingship unfolds and finds its fulfillment in Jesus Christ, the Anointed One. Through suffering and praise, the Psalms give voice to the cries and hopes of God's people. Join us as we trace the path of the true King and the glory of his coming reign. Hallelujah. Hi, I'm Sean Lehman, together with my wife Kara Lehman and Doug Victor, with Rod Gerber in charge of the technical end. We will be the podcasters for 1st and 2nd Samuel. 1st and 2nd Samuel in the original Hebrew were one book, and they tell the story of how God brought kingship to his chosen people. The story begins while still in the time of the judges, and takes us through when King David is established as king over all 12 tribes of Israel, and the nation is at peace. For world history context, Samuel was born around 1100 BC. This time period is one of great transition for the world, as the Bronze Age is coming to an end and the Iron Age is taking off. Also, the 100-year time period leading up to the birth of Samuel, sometimes called the Late Bronze Age collapse, saw the collapse of nearly every major civilization in the Near East region.
This week, we'll read chapters 1 through 7. I've heard Samuel referred to as the last of the judges and the first of the prophets.
Yeah, Judges ended in chaos. The Israelites had just come through a civil war where the tribe of Benjamin was nearly wiped out. Now we step into Samuel's birth story.
Right. The book opens with his father Elkanah having 2 wives, Hannah, who was barren, and Peninnah, who had children. Scholars think Hannah was likely his first wife whom he favored, but Peninnah was added to continue the family line.
Interesting. That's like the story of Jacob and Rachel, where Rachel was the favored one, but couldn't have kids, while Leah had many.
For sure, and it doesn't stop there. Abraham and Sarah were barren into their 90s before Isaac, and Isaac and Rebekah were married 20 years before they had Jacob and Esau. Each time, the child born became a significant leader to God's people.
Wow, that's interesting to think about. So all 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, had wives who struggled with barrenness, and those children became leaders. Hannah fits right into that pattern.
Yeah, she does. Even later, John the Baptist's mom fits into that pattern. While Mary wasn't barren, Jesus' birth was the same pattern of humanly impossible.
So barrenness is a reoccurring theme, almost like it sets the stage for God to move in a powerful way.
Yeah, it's often when people are most desperate, most surrendered, and that they recognize their need for God. And that's when God's glory really shows up.
So, as a character study, how does Hannah line up? In chapter 1, she's grieving, not eating, weeping, and praying. She even vows to give her child to God for all his days. Then, in a plot twist, Eli sees her and falsely accuses her of just being drunk.
Oh, man. I think I would have cried and ran away.
Yeah, probably.
Even been tempted to run from God.
Yeah, no kidding. But Hannah doesn't. She responds humbly and acknowledges her pain and her need for God. And Eli blesses her, and she leaves in peace.
Yeah, then Samuel's born, and Hannah just keeps her vow, bringing him to the temple to serve God. So, Kara, I'm curious, what did you think of her prayer in chapter 2?
I was excited to study it. I knew that Mary's song mirrored it in Luke chapter 1, but honestly, at first, Hannah's prayer felt confusing and choppy until I dug into it more and learned that there are so many quotes and ties to other scriptures. She praises God's holiness, reflecting Miriam's song after the Red Sea. She refers to God as a rock, language from Moses in the wilderness. She talks about the foundations of the world, like Job, and the thunder from the Most High, like Mount Sinai. And then she goes into a bunch of inverses.
Yeah, like the hungry will be full and the full will be hungry. And he brings down to the grave and he raises up. Or he humbles and he exalts. What do you make of that?
Well, to me, that sounds like a lot like the Beatitudes, though those hadn't even been written yet.
You're right. That is so cool. Her prayer is reflecting biblical scripts all over the place. It reminds me of being at my in-laws' house in early marriage. They'd practically have a whole conversations using movie quotes.
Oh boy.
What? Inconceivable. That's a quote from The Princess Bride, by the way.
I think we're digressing.
Right. If I didn't know the reference to these, it sounds choppy and confusing. But those who had seen the movie were sure tracking and spinning off each other. And that's what Hannah was doing. She deeply believed that the God of the wilderness, the Red Sea, Job, and Mount Sinai was doing the impossible in her life. And Samuel himself, though not in Jesus' lineage, became pivotal in launching Israel's kingship, thus preparing the way for Christ.
Hannah's story is one that is full of feel-good. But we only get as far as chapter 2 before we meet some characters who don't bring warm and fuzzy feelings to the reader.
Yeah, you must be talking about Eli's two sons.
Mm-hmm. Hophni and Phinehas.
Yeah, those guys. KJV readers will recognize a term that's used fairly often to describe bad guys, sons of Belial, or as my mind thinks of it, stomach bile.
Never thought about that. I guess I can see that.
Yeah. The ESV calls them worthless men. The ASV calls them base men. NIV calls them scoundrels. CEB, despicable men. CSB, wicked men.
Ugh,
Oh, my.
that paints a pretty good picture.
Yeah. So Eli was the high priest, and his sons Hophni and Phinehas were priests. And the priests, as described in Leviticus, were entitled to a portion of the offerings that people brought to sacrifice.
Yeah, but it sounds like they were just taking whatever they wanted.
Yeah, taking more than their portion or the better portion. But I think worst of all was taking the meat raw and roasting it and eating it with the fat.
And that was supposed to be for the Lord, right? Like a sweet-smelling savor?
Yeah. Yeah, so the different sacrifices were handled differently, but in Leviticus 3:17 it says, "It shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout your dwellings, that you eat neither fat nor blood."
Weren't they also sleeping with the women?
Wow. Sounds like the phrase from our introduction in Judges. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes.
Yeah. And Eli knew what they were doing, and he disapproved of it, but he did nothing to stop it. Well, eventually the Lord has enough, and he sends a man of God who prophesies that God is going to cut off the house of Eli forever, and that his sons will die.
Wasn't it Samuel that prophesied that? You know, with the calling in the night and him going to Eli saying, "Here I am," 3 times before realizing it was God speaking to him?
Yeah, I thought the same thing. But if you look a little bit closer, Samuel did prophesy that. But in chapter 2, there was the man of God who prophesied the same thing.
Yeah, that was something I had overlooked too.
Yeah, so with Samuel, it was more like God saying, hey, you know that thing I said was going to happen? Well, it's about to happen.
Right. And without getting too much into your section, Doug, there was a war with the Philistines. Hophni and Phinehas both die. And upon hearing the news, Eli falls over backward and breaks his neck and dies. And then furthermore, upon hearing the news, Phinehas' wife, who was pregnant, goes into labor and dies in childbirth.
As we move on in our reading this week, we come across an interesting account involving the Ark of the Covenant and how the Israelites just wrongly took it into battle.
Yeah, I noticed in this account Samuel isn't even mentioned, although we see the prophecy that was given to him in chapter 3 carried out. It seems that once again, God uses the poor choices of people to ultimately carry out his purposes.
Yep, so let's back up a bit. Kara, how about you giving us a little history of this ark?
Sure. God told Noah to build a boat.
Oh, wait.
Haha, just kidding. Wrong ark. Okay, we read in Exodus 25 where God gives Moses detailed instructions on how to construct the Ark of the Covenant. At the end of these instructions, God gives Moses these words in verse 21 and 22. "You shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I will give you. And there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim, which are on the ark of the testimony, about everything which I will give you in commandment to the children of Israel." Those are powerful words given to Moses.
Yeah. Yep.
Then in Exodus 37, Bezalel constructs the ark, and in Exodus 40, it is placed in the tabernacle behind the veil.
Okay, yep, thanks. So back to the battle. It was not uncommon for the ark to be taken to the battle. You guys remember Jericho?
Yeah, the priests carried it around Jericho, and before that they carried it into the Jordan. When they stepped into the water, the river parted.
Right, and with great success. So the ark really was the presence of God with them. But in the account we are reading this week, which by the way is probably around 300 years after Jericho, the Israelites decided to take the ark into battle without consulting God. The priests were ungodly men, and the ark was used more as a good luck charm for the battle. The ark is then captured by the Philistines, who placed it in the house of their pagan god, Dagon.
I read in the ESV Study Bible that the practice of capturing enemies' gods was common in that time, and that it was understood that a people whose god was in the enemy's hands was completely conquered. The ark was not an idol, but the Philistines treated it like one, and felt that they had captured the God of Israel.
And how did that work out for the Philistines?
Yeah, God showed his mighty power. Dagon was broken into pieces in the presence of the ark, and the Philistine people suffered greatly wherever the ark was sent. It really is an interesting account and a worthwhile study. Even the way the Philistines finally returned the ark is quite incredible. Yeah, they used 2 cows separated from their calves to pull the ark on a cart. And God again shows his sovereign power even over the animals. The cows never looked back, and the ark is returned to Israelite territory.
Yeah, it's like they set it up for all possible ways to fail, but it wasn't going to fail.
Right.
Carrie, you pointed something out to me recently that I thought was really interesting, how the Philistines sent back the ark with images or small idols of rats and tumors as payment to appease the god that they had offended.
Right? Doesn't that just sound pagan, making golden idols of rats and tumors to win God's favor?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that worked out so well either. The ark then continues its journey back to Israel and actually causes trouble and destruction for the people of Israel because it was not handled correctly. The punishment seems harsh, but it just probably reflects God's absolute holiness and his earlier commands regarding the ark. We'll read more of the ark later on in Samuel, but I like the way our reading ends this week on a positive note. Let's go to chapter 7, where again the Israelites gather. 20 years have passed since chapter 4, verse 1. Samuel is established as the last judge of Israel, and under his leadership, the Israelites return to the Lord. The Philistines are defeated, not by the presence of the ark, but by God's almighty power and protection.
Thanks for joining us as we begin 10 weeks in the book of Samuel with a week of relevant Psalms in the middle. We look forward to many exciting and familiar stories, and it's our prayer that they will not just be stories, but evidence of God working towards a greater purpose.